Hello, and welcome back to the weekly astrology podcast, where we weave the transits of the week into the phases of the lunar cycle. I am your host, Sarah Posh, and this week brings us to the third quarter lunar phase of this crazy intense Leo lunar cycle. And while this Leo lunar cycle is ending with clarity and speed, with the main focus of Mars and Mercury in a sextile, the moon is whispering not so fast. And why I'm saying that even though Mercury and Mars are ready to go and ready to go fast, that third quarter moon and its final waning phases of this lunar phase has some important key considerations for us to pay attention to before we just launch forward. This week, I'm going to show you some charts to show you the special sequence of astrology events playing into this week's messages, particularly why the moon is saying not so fast and why it's actually a very helpful and supportive consideration. Now that we're on the other side of that major Aquarius full moon, that domino effect that was set off, especially with Mars finally completing that astrological kite, I'm curious, what happened? What did you notice, if anything, was put into major motion? Did you feel empowered during the full moon week to show up in new ways, to make some new choices, or implement new actions? Or did you feel like this energy was just more destabilizing and scattered? It was a lot of push and pull. Comment below and just let us know where you're at, what you're feeling, if you're excited, if you feel like there's a lot of things moving in a direction that you're really inspired about, or if you're just feeling freaking exhausted and a little bit overwhelmed or stressed out. I know for me, I definitely felt a challenge to work through this push pull exhaustion of both Mars opposing that Saturn, Neptune, and Aries, as well as the excitement with Mars activating the grand air trine. I'm personally really looking forward to the help of this third quarter lunar phase to fully implement and refine a few more changes that will hopefully push my domino train even more towards the overall direction that this Leo lunar cycle and the Mercury retrograde has given me around this renewed inspiration and creative energy, and also just a greater expansion and embodiment of joy. If you're here and you're enjoying this content, please go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel, turn your notifications on. That way you're going to get the videos as soon as they come out. As I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, I'm noticing this specific sequence of the transits and the movement of the moon during this week that has a particular importance to understanding the overall cosmic storyline playing out for us. So today I'm going to pull up this chart and I'm going to show you visually what's happening in the sky. So as we can see on this chart, we are beginning this week on Thursday, August 14th. We can see that the moon has just entered into Taurus. And later this evening, we're going to get our first of two Mars and Libra sextile Mercury and Leo. The reason why we get this sextile twice is because Mercury just stationed direct, which means that Mercury is still moving incredibly slow. It's just newly visible as a morning star rising just before the sun at sunrise. And it's still picking up speed as it's moving in direction. While typically Mercury as an inferior planet is always moving faster than Mars, so usually Mercury is the applying planet in their aspects together, because of Mercury's recent station and slow speed, right now Mars is actually the faster moving planet. With Mars moving faster and applying this sextile back to Mercury and Leo, I almost imagine that Mars is saying to Mercury, let's go, I'm ready, follow me, and tell everyone our clear direction, our clear decisions, we're moving. Except Mercury in Leo, who's stationing, is actually saying, wait, Mars, like not so fast. I have word from this moon in Taurus that there's a final key that we would benefit from pausing and retrieving before just rushing forward into the next phase. The thing about this, as you can see in this chart, is that because of the moon's placement in Taurus, the moon can see Mercury in Leo, but the moon cannot see Mars and Mars cannot see the moon. They're in what's called an inversion. So what Mercury has access to with that moon in Taurus, Mars doesn't. So this is where our desire to move, the Mars in us that's ready to go and it's excited to take that action, Mercury is actually helping us with that moon to say, wait, 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 I think there's something else that we can consider, that we can get. The thing that's even more extra special about this is that the moon in Taurus at this time is in one of the best positions possible. The moon is an aversion to both of the malefics or the difficult planets, Saturn in Aries and Mars in Libra. And the moon is making a mutual reception, a sextile to Venus and Jupiter in Cancer. Not only is that double benefic exalted Jupiter in Cancer, a sextile, we're like, yeah, this moon's exalted. There's also a mutual reception between Venus and the moon. So there's like a lot of good conversation and energy happening between the moon in Taurus and the Venus Jupiter in Cancer. And Mercury knows that. Mercury can see that. Mercury can hear that. And that's why Mercury is telling us and telling Mars, whoa, 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 whoa. Wait a second. And so also that kind of invites this idea that this final third quarter moon has the development of potential circumstances that bring light to improving circumstances even further. So even if you thought they were really good after the kite, after the Venus Jupiter conjunction, the moon in Taurus has something to add. It might be that the moon is resourcing us with more connections to better stabilize our foundations, ideas for improving the quality even further with the moon in Taurus of our experiences. And there might just be some really helpful final adjustments that we could consider with that third quarter phase before we just jump into the action. So, really pay attention on Thursday and Friday, August 14th and 15th, with the moon in Taurus applying to activate our third quarter lunar phase, the phase where we really make our final changes, we integrate our new awareness, we refine our adjustments, and bring things to completion. This Taurus third quarter moon has something very helpful and auspicious for bringing into that phase and into those final adjustments. And then as we progress forward on Saturday, August 16th, this is another key whisper from the moon before moving too fast forward. The moon is going to enter into Gemini. And this is significant because the moon is going to reactivate those grand air trines between Mars in Libra, Uranus in Gemini, and Pluto in Aquarius. The moon in Gemini is also able to witness both Mercury in Leo and Mars in Libra. So now today, the moon is really talking to everybody and tethering this conversation. Like there's this open communication line between maybe the events that were opened back in the week prior during that full moon and those grand air trines. And now with these Mars Mercury sextiles, before we go into the end of this phase, the moon is going through Gemini and kind of giving this final touch of potential opportunity, change, fruition of an idea. There's maybe a new connection that the moon brings, or it could be that the moon helps us to see where we can change our routines. Maybe there's new information that moon in Gemini brings that's like a final touch or a final key to retrieve. There could be a new resource that opens a channel for those grand air trine ideas to flow a little bit more smoothly. It could also be that the moon in Gemini is showing us some, different strategies for grounding some of that grand air tri energy into our everyday routines, integrating them into our relational dynamics and contracts and agreements. So it's really important on Saturday and Sunday with that moon in Gemini to be really open for anything helpful, any resource, information, conversation, connection that might help even move those ideas further faster than what we already thought. I also think taking into consideration that the moon in Gemini at this point is in that dark phase of the moon. So we are waning in light, decreasing in light. And this is the phase where it's really about letting go and deconstruction or composting. And so I'm curious if maybe there's something the moon in Gemini wants us to recognize that if we let go, it could actually create space for what those grand air trines showed us might be possible of where we could be moving forward. So maybe that's, cleaning out your closet in a very literal way, like creating space so that new things can come in, this new wardrobe of these new future possibilities. It could also be that there's something, if we think about the Gemini mercurial side of things, is there maybe a limiting belief that the moon in Gemini is revealing? There's a readiness for a deeper healing and integration of these new programmings in our own mind, these new ways of thinking about our circumstances and ourselves that are going to require us to let go of any outdated thoughts, any outdated perspectives, beliefs, or just ways of thinking about what it is that we're capable of and where we're capable of going. I always think about how there's so many times, especially with clients and with myself, we put some sort of manifestation, desire, wish out into the world. We're like, I would really love for this to happen. I see it especially in like romantic partnership a lot, where somebody is trying to call in a partner, but they're still operating on a lot of beliefs where it's like, well, I'm single. And we're just continuing to kind of pave this neural pathway that doesn't actually leave any runway for something new to drive up and land on. So I really think that this moon in Gemini, it could be a positive development that further moves things forward. It could be a deconstruction adjustment. It could be moving something out of the way so the things that are moving forward can move forward even faster. And it could be a deeper healing, a deeper clarity around our own thinking that could be updated. And then as we progress this chart forward, we're going to get to Sunday, August 17th. And at this point, Mercury is starting to pick up speed. This is when we get that second sextile between Mercury and Leo to Mars and Libra. And this time, Mercury is the faster moving planet. So Mercury is actually the applying planet in this aspect. And after the moon moving through Taurus and the early parts of Gemini, now both Mercury and Mars are both more fully informed and ready to move the clarity, the ideas forward into action. At this point, Mercury is very visible in the morning sky. On Sunday, August 17th, if you can, set your alarms and wake up before sunrise. The morning sky is going to be so incredibly beautiful. We've got the moon and Gemini leading the pack, moving towards that balsamic crescent morning moon. And right next to the moon, you'll be able to see Jupiter and then Venus in Cancer to follow the moon. And then after that, we see Mercury as morning star. This is a really powerful omen. This is something that I really invite you to take the time to go out and watch and observe these rising morning stars before sunrise. They're rising right before the completion of this incredibly important and impactful Leo lunar cycle. So take that time if you can, set your alarms, and maybe spend a little time meditating with the sky with the sunrise, just before sunrise, and just see how it feels to watch this alignment, this march of the planets moving, beginning with that moon. Sunday with that second Mercury Mars sextile. Again, this is that kind of more fully informed readiness to take that action, to move those things forward in a bigger, faster way. At this point, I would say by the end of the weekend, don't be afraid to implement the changes, to take action, to say yes to those agreements, to start to really move forward. And then as we move those things forward, we feel this kind of momentum building towards the end and completion of this cycle by the end of the weekend. That comes to a little bit of, I wouldn't say a halt, but it's like all of that energy gets pulled over on its road trip forward. Because on Monday, August 18th, we're going to have the moon enter into Cancer. And when the moon first enters Cancer, it has to contend with those squares to Saturn and Neptune retrograde in Aries. This also means that the moon's going to be squaring Mars and Libra and reactivating the push-pull tension that we talked about earlier in this episode between Mars and Libra and Saturn and Neptune in Aries. And so on Monday, kind of noticing what's coming up that feels heavy or challenging, like it's pulling you over from all of the excitement and inspiration. And how is this actually showing you the care that is going to be required to overcome the challenges in the long term in right relationship with our body and our emotional body? That moon in Cancer is really helping us to see the final things and the final adjustments that need to be made so that we can set ourselves up for future challenges, knowing that care is a quality ingredient or supplement, shall we say, to conquer the challenges that lie ahead in our long-term commitments that we've made. It's almost like that moon in Cancer is giving us this supplement list that we would be really smart to go ahead and stock up on, knowing that we've got a long road ahead of us. There are big things that we are saying yes to. There are commitments and responsibilities that we have hopefully identified at this point with those Mars oppositions to Saturn and Neptune. And so, what is it that this Cancer moon is saying? This will support you, this will feed you, nourish you. It'll help you both cushion yourself to prepare to conquer those challenges, to move through them, and then also to support yourself in integrating maybe after the challenge is overcome or confronted. And so on Monday, it might be good to just pause and consider, what helps you slow down without stopping? What is this Cancer moon highlighting? Are limitations that need to be respected more if we're really committed to following through on these long-term commitments? What boundaries do we actually need to implement at this time versus what limitations need more courage? This moon in Cancer is also showing us maybe our vulnerable or soft spots where we might back down from a challenge because we're a little scared or we feel a little bit small or weakened by the challenge in front of us. And so this is going to give us that opportunity to kind of see not only what are the limitations that are respected versus overcome, what is the best way to be the caretaker of ourselves as the one who is holding ourselves through whatever challenges come up, right? Whatever hurdles or obstacles. And then it's kind of like we get really scared. We see the sirens pulling us over. We're like, oh no, I'm going to get a ticket. Like worst case scenario, probably brain comes up. But actually what happens is the cop lets you go and you go ahead and continue on your road trip. And it was like, oh wait, that pause, because I paused on Monday because I got pulled over when I didn't want to. Actually, all the traffic in front of me cleared up. The road is even more open because then on Tuesday, we're going to have the moon moving into the conjunction with both benefics, Venus and Jupiter in Cancer. Also special on Tuesday, August 19th, is that Mercury reaches its point of greatest elongation in its synodic cycle with the sun. This means that it is the maximum distance away from the sun that it can possibly get before starting to move into that next conjunction with the sun. And so we're back on the road. The traffic has cleared. Mercury has its peak distance from the sun, its peak point of clarity and integration. And this moment, it's almost like we have this announcement from Mercury of where it is we are truly ready to say yes. The moon is with benefics. And maybe at this point, there is this final completion point, this integration point of the deeper underworld journey that we did with that Mercury retrograde in Leo around those themes of self-confidence, of authentic self-expression, of being able to follow and feel our joy, to feel good in the skin and the being of just who we are, and to say yes to this main character energy in our own storylines. Tuesday is really a special day to pay attention to, and it might be a little bit more of an internal feeling that we have. Like it's back to that driving on the road trip example. Like it's not like anybody else is in the car with you, but suddenly everything's changed. Everything feels different. And even though nobody's with you, you feel completely seen. It's like we don't need anybody else to witness that. If we come back to that imagery I've been giving throughout this cycle around the mirror that we've been cleaning and amplifying during this Leo lunar cycle, for the first time, we are totally able to see so clearly ourselves in a newly empowered way. So I'd love to hear if you're somebody come Tuesday, you feel this big aha healing announcement moment, even if it's just with yourself. Drop in the comments below. I'd love to hear, how are you feeling on this final leg of this Leo lunar cycle journey? Are you really feeling any sort of internal announcement or healing, a final kind of aha moment? I'd love to hear. And then as we go ahead, we move forward to the final hours of the Leo lunar cycle in the third corner lunar phase. On Wednesday, August 20th, the moon is going to enter into Leo in its final balsamic phase. And this moon in Leo is really completing this entire cycle and the storyline of this week's transits on Thursday, August 21st. The moon in Leo is going to be making a sextile to Mars in Libra and then a conjunction to Mercury in Leo in the morning hours just before going void of course until it meets the sun at 0 degrees Virgo and we start that next lunar cycle. So again, this is like the moon in Leo at its balsamic point, putting this final punctuation, reaching our final destination, and then allowing that space from that awareness or that completion, that arrival of that moon conjuncting Mercury at the final connection point. And then I love that on the rest of Thursday into Friday before the next new moon, we have that moon void of course to kind of take that space, step back, and really integrate rest, retreat as a way to prepare ourselves to really get active and get out there for the somewhat exciting, chaotic, well, whatever it is, it will be surprising and electric energy of the next new moon cycle. I'm going to dive into all of the reasons I just used all of those words to describe our next lunar cycle in next week's episode. So again, turn your notifications on and subscribe to this channel so that you'll be here when we dive into the opening of our next new moon, that Virgo new moon, Virgo lunar cycle, and also the final lunation before we are fully in eclipse season, which is its own ball game, baby. So lots to talk about in next week's episode and in our next lunar cycle. Be sure to check out all of my links below if you're looking for more information on my offerings, whether that's astrological consultations. I also have a lot of different astrology products that are available for you to purchase on my website. And of course, my Spotify playlist that will be all brand new come next week's episode for the new lunar cycle. So all of those links, again, they are dropped below for you, ready and available. You can find them there. And I hope that everybody has a beautiful final leg of this Leo lunar cycle journey. I wish you all the best arrival to the clarity, the healing, and the inspiration before leaping into the unknown of this next new moon and next episode. I am Sarah Posh. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next week.